I stood with my mother at the doorway of Miss Green's house. Miss Green had become a close friend of my mom's ever since things had gotten tough for us. Mom had been cleaning for her 3 times a week and waitressing at a small restaurant the rest of the days. The strain of supporting both of us on the meager income she earned was starting to show in her tired face. Mom gently placed her hand on my shoulder as the door opened. "Hello, Karen, sorry we're late." "We were just at the park," Mom said softly, ushering me inside. Mom leaned in close to Miss Green and whispered, "I just need to explain everything properly to Charlie." "I completely understand," Miss Green replied, and she and Mom began to discuss the details of my stay. Earlier, while we were walking in the park, Mom had tried to explain why she had to leave. She told me how difficult things had been since Dad left, and how she would send for me as soon as she could manage to get some work. We had arrived late because I had cried for so long, and now, as I looked around Miss Green's simple home, my eyes burned and my head felt heavy. After a while, Mom came to find me, as I had wandered into the lounge. "Charlie, remember, this is only temporary." I lowered my head to my chest. "Don't leave me here, Mom," I sobbed. "Do you want to stay with Aunt Sylvia instead?" "No way. You know I can't stand her. I just want to stay with you." As soon as the words left my mouth, I looked up and saw Miss Green standing in the doorway. It was the first time I truly noticed her appearance. She had a pleasant, smiling face framed by her neatly styled hair. Her clothes were simple, clean, and perfectly pressed. She wore pale tights, and her shoes gleamed. Mom saw my distraction and quickly kissed me, saying goodbye. Then, she stood at the doorway with Miss Green. The 2 women exchanged a few quiet words before Mom looked back at me, turned, and left, the door quietly closing behind her. My thoughts raced. I couldn't understand how I had ended up in this unfamiliar house. Where was Mom, and who was this woman standing before me? I rushed to the door, grabbed the handle, and tried to pull it open. "You live here now, your mother has gone." "Stop tugging at the door," Miss Green said in a calm yet firm voice. "Go away, you can't tell me what to do." The words escaped my mouth, sharp and angry. "Leave the door alone." "It's locked, so stop trying to force it," Miss Green's voice raised to match mine. Frustrated, I kicked the door, then slumped down with my back against it. Sitting on the floor with my knees drawn up to my chest, I buried my face in my legs and sobbed, calling out for Mom. When I opened my eyes, I found myself lying on the floor, the room dark. How long had I been asleep? The house was silent. I stood up and walked into the lounge, which was empty. Was that a voice I heard? I moved further into the house toward the light. It led me to the kitchen, where Miss Green and Aunt Sylvia were sitting at a round table. The 2 women sat in silence. I stopped in the middle of the room, hands shoved deep into my pockets. "Where's my room?" I asked, my voice sharp. Miss Green didn't answer, her gaze fixed on me. Aunt Sylvia sipped her tea, placed the cup back on its saucer, and stood up. She grabbed her bag, turned to Miss Green, and snapped, "Well, you know what I think, Karen." She pushed her chair in and walked toward me, stopping to look me up and down. Turning to Miss Green, she said, "It's the only way you know." With that, she brushed past me and left the room. Once again, I was alone with Miss Green in the house. "Well, Richard, what shall we do with you?" she asked. "I don't care," I muttered. A heavy silence followed. "All right, let me show you your room," she said, leading me up the stairs. She paused at the bathroom before turning into a pale pink room with a single bed, covered in an embroidered bedspread. "This is it?" I asked as I entered the room, disbelief in my voice. She didn't respond, and the door was quickly shut behind me as she left. I woke to sunlight streaming through the sash window beside the bed. I slid out of bed and began looking for my clothes, but they were gone. Instead, there was a white bathrobe. With no other choice, I put it on, tied it at my waist, and made my way downstairs. When I reached the bottom, I found myself staring at the front door. A thought crossed my mind, maybe I should try to escape again. I grabbed the door handle, but it was locked. I sighed and walked into the lounge. As soon as I entered, my arm was grabbed, and I was forced into a chair. Aunt Sylvia, of course. Miss Green sat beside me. "We can't keep going like this, Richard, can we?" she said. "Of course we can't," I snapped back. Ignoring my response, she continued, "Your aunt and I have decided to give you a chance to change your ways. She has no say over me. Mom said that Number 1, no more arguing or swearing," she cut me off, her voice sharp. "Failure to comply will result in your mouth being washed out with carbolic soap." I wasn't about to back down. "Bollocks," I muttered. I may have been tough for a 12-year-old, but Aunt Sylvia had me in a tight arm lock, and I couldn't do anything as she dragged me toward the bathroom. Miss Green took a fresh bar of soap, worked it into a lather, and rubbed my toothbrush against it. "Open up," she commanded. Aunt Sylvia twisted my wrist until I opened my mouth just enough for the brush to be shoved in. The brush scrubbed the inside of my mouth, and every time I tried to bite down, Aunt Sylvia's grip tightened. They left me there to deal with the foul taste, telling me to take a bath, wash my hair, and be back in the lounge in no more than 30 minutes. I did as I was told and returned to their presence, meekly, within the time limit. "Sit," Miss Green ordered. Once again, I obeyed. "Last night, you displayed all the traits your aunt warned me about: rudeness, foul language, and aggression. I won't tolerate it," she continued. I was on the edge of snapping back, but the lingering taste of soap in my mouth reminded me to keep quiet. As I looked at both women sitting side by side, I started to see the similarities between them. They were both meticulous about their appearance, their hair neatly styled, and they both carried an air of superiority. I remembered an incident when Aunt Sylvia had visited Mom. She disapproved of me running around barefoot all summer and hated the sound of me kicking my football against the house. Above all, she disliked my hair. Looking back, I thought maybe it was because it was wild and untamed, unlike her pristine style. Perhaps it was also because of the 70s vibe I had, the carefree, hippie child I had been. "Based on your behavior, your aunt and I have decided to make some changes. At first, they may seem confusing, but over time, they'll help you manage your emotions and bring some structure to your time here." As she spoke, I felt tears welling up inside me. "What changes?" I don't want." My head began to spin again, the words changes and confusing ringing in my ears. Aunt Sylvia placed her finger over my lips to silence my protest. "Small changes, only small ones to start, and then the rest will depend on how you behave," she said, locking eyes with me. She then turned to Miss Green. "Would you mind fetching the tape measure and the pen and paper?" Miss Green handed them to Aunt Sylvia. "Stand up, Richard," Aunt Sylvia commanded. I stood, and the two women began measuring me, calling out numbers as Miss Green recorded them. When they were finished, Aunt Sylvia asked for my shoe size. "I don't know," I replied. "Fine, we'll take you to the store to get fitted," Aunt Sylvia hissed. There was a knock at the door. Miss Green looked at Aunt Sylvia. "That will be Emma. Do you need me to stop and help?" No. We'll be fine." "You're not going to cause any more trouble, are you, Richard?" I lowered my head in defeat. Emma entered, struggling to carry 2 small cases. "Where should I work, Karen?" "I think the kitchen will be best. Come through, and I'll show you the issue." Miss Green led Emma through the house, calling for me to follow. "Let's take a look." "Oh, yeah, plenty of volume," Emma said, lifting my hair, her tone reminding me of the knit lady who used to come to school. Miss Green pulled a high stool out from under the breakfast bar, guided me over, and sat me down. Emma rummaged through one of her cases, pulling out a shiny pink cloth. She walked behind me and draped it around my shoulders. It was clear now, Emma was a hairdresser. "I don't want a haircut," I shouted, attempting to slide off the stool. Get back in the chair, now, Miss Green snapped, her cold stare making it clear there was no room for argument. I hesitated for a moment, then climbed back into the stool. Emma was kind enough to come here on short notice. So listen carefully, if you try to move, fidget, or speak, there will be consequences. I didn't care much about the state of my hair, but I did like the wild, 70s look it had. It was long, slightly wavy, and styled like George Best's, swept back and carefree. Emma began to comb through my hair, dipping the comb in water to dampen it. As she worked, she brushed it down from my crown. Do you like having hair like a girl? Her words caught me off guard, but seeing Miss Green watching me, I kept quiet. Emma didn't say anything else to me and focused on what she was doing. She laid her tools out on the table, long, thin scissors, special scissors with combs attached, clips, spray bottles, lotions, and more combs. Emma clipped up the back of my hair, leaving just a small section hanging down. She picked up the scissors and started trimming the hair. Is this short enough? She asked Miss Green. Miss Green circled around me, thinking for a moment. When it dries, I want the back to be this short. I couldn't see exactly where she was pointing, but Emma immediately went back to cutting. That's better, Miss Green said. Emma continued, unpinning sections of hair, combing it down, and cutting it neatly. Once the clips were all removed, she combed down the sides and the front. She cut from just in front of my left ear to the right ear, and with each snip, more of the hair in front of my face fell away. Miss Green smiled at me, and I could feel my cheeks burning with embarrassment. In my mind, I was imagining a clean-cut, neat back-and-sides haircut, something that felt too polished, too proper. Just then, Aunt Sylvia entered, slamming the door shut behind her. She burst into laughter. Well, look at this pretty little girl. That was the tipping point. I jumped out of the chair and ran for the bathroom. When I looked in the mirror, I almost felt sick. Emma had given me a haircut almost identical to Aunt Sylvia's, a shorter version of the bob Mum used to call it. You bloody idiot, I muttered under my breath. My hair now looked like a helmet, with a fringe just above my eyes. I pushed my fingers through it, trying to push it back, but it stuck in place. From the corner of my eye, I saw Aunt Sylvia coming down the hall. I grabbed the door, slammed it shut, but it only stopped when she shoved it open. Before I knew it, she had a firm grip on me and was marching me back to the bedroom. She held me down on the bed and pulled up my gown, giving me 3 sharp slaps across my backside. Hold still, you were warned, she said. Both women held me down as Aunt Sylvia slipped some pants over my legs. Then they stood me up and yanked the pants into place. The sting from the slaps was sharp, and when I looked down, I saw they had put a pair of yellow girls' underwear on me. I wanted to scream, to run out of the room, but I was frozen in place. This is what happens when you're disobedient, Aunt Sylvia taunted. Sit down, Charlie, Miss Green said quietly. Aunt Sylvia went to the wardrobe and pulled out some clothes, laying them on the bed beside me. There was a white shirt with a rounded collar and a pair of yellow dungarees with short legs, what I thought were called pedal pushers. Staring at them, my eyes widened, and my jaw dropped. No way, I protested. You can either wear these, or we'll put you in a dress, Aunt Sylvia mocked, pulling my arms out of the dressing gown and into the shirt. Her quick fingers fastened the pearl-like buttons. Miss Green placed my feet into the pedal pushers, pulling them up my legs. As she placed the braces over my shoulders and fastened them, I stood there, feeling humiliated. Tears streamed down my face, my cheeks burning, as they snapped the poppers shut on the inside of my knees. I tried to resist when Aunt Sylvia grabbed my hand and led me downstairs. When we entered the kitchen, Emma, the hairdresser, took one look at me and said, "Quite the change. Let's hope your behavior improves too." She led me to the stool where my hair had been cut earlier. Looking down, I saw the yellow pedal pushers and my bare calves and feet. I was standing in the cuttings of my own hair, which made me think of the ridiculous haircut. I reluctantly sat back on the stool, and the cape was secured around my neck once more. Aunt Sylvia slowly walked around me, studying my appearance, before standing directly in front of me. She bent down, hands on her knees, her face only a couple of feet from mine, and examined my haircut. "You've done a good job, Emma, but I don't think this suits his behavior. Something a little more childish might be better." My heart raced, and I felt my face burn with humiliation. Emma stepped beside Aunt Sylvia. "How about a shorter fringe, like we give the little girls?" "Excellent idea," Aunt Sylvia said, her gaze locking with mine. "Just like the little girls." I squirmed under the pink plastic cape as Emma combed my hair flat against my forehead. The coolness of the scissors made me jump as they traced around my head, and more hair fell away. Emma combed it down again. "It'll get even shorter as it dries," Emma said cheerfully to Aunt Sylvia. Aunt Sylvia stood back, arms crossed, a broad smile on her face. The sound of the hairdryer whirred to life as Emma picked up a round brush, curling the ends of my hair under while drying it. Occasionally, she switched to a fine comb, carefully working the back of my hair down from my crown. Then she focused on my freshly cut fringe, brushing it down and under. I was horrified at what was happening, and looking at Aunt Sylvia, I could see she was enjoying every moment of my discomfort. Finally, Emma turned off the dryer, combed my fringe once more, and used the side of the comb to pat the fringe higher, straightening it across my forehead. Then she sprayed my hair with lacquer. Emma brushed the loose hairs from my neck and face with a soft brush before whisking the cape off. I was left sitting on the stool, staring down at the yellow pedal pushers, overwhelmed by the humiliation I felt. "Come into the hall and look in the mirror at your new self," Aunt Sylvia laughed. I walked into the hall and turned to look in the mirror. I nearly fainted when I saw the shiny little girl haircut I had been given. The back and sides were curled under to just below my ears, and a fringe ran straight across the middle of my forehead. It was perfectly neat and styled, curled under with precision. I turned to see Miss Green entering the hall. "Oh dear, I hope we haven't gone too far," she said. "Ridiculous, Karen. If he's going to act like a spoiled little girl, he might as well look the part," Aunt Sylvia replied. I couldn't take it anymore. "You've made me look ridiculous," I shouted. "How can I possibly go outside like this?" "Well, if you're going to speak like that, you'll soon find out," Aunt Sylvia retorted. Miss Green handed me my shoes, tossing them at my feet. Finally, some of my old clothes. Maybe this would get me back to normal. I pulled the socks out from inside the shoes, where I had stuffed them the night before when undressing, and pulled them on. I tied the thick laces of the shoes and stood, staring at them. They looked huge without trousers, which reminded me of the rest of my outfit. The front door swung open, and Aunt Sylvia grabbed my arm, pulling me outside before I had a chance to react. I turned to see Miss Green closing the door and walking with us down the front path. There I was, outside, dressed like a 7-year-old girl with a matching haircut. I was finally on the other side of the door I had tried so hard to open, and all I wanted was to be back inside. Then a car door opened, and I gladly climbed inside. I slouched low in the seat, trying to hide from the outside world. Aunt Sylvia sat beside me, and Miss Green was in the front driving. The car finally stopped, and Miss Green opened my door. "Oh please, Miss Green, don't make me get out dressed like this," I begged. "Come along, you can't stay in the car forever," Aunt Sylvia said from behind me. I continued to refuse until Aunt Sylvia leaned over and whispered in my ear. "If you keep misbehaving, maybe you'd like to see what you look like with pierced ears and some nicely plucked eyebrows." I quickly climbed out of the car, and Aunt Sylvia grabbed my hand as we headed toward the small Clark's shoe shop we had parked in front of. Inside, the shop was warm and bright, and I noticed a faint smell of leather. Aunt Sylvia led me to the left side, where we sat on a long, padded bench. I realized with a sinking feeling that we were on the girls' side of the store, surrounded by women's and girls' shoes. Aunt Sylvia stood up and walked down the aisle to speak to an assistant. Miss Green knelt in front of me, removed my shoes and socks, and I sat there in stunned silence, unsure of what was happening. I looked up to see Aunt Sylvia and the assistant standing in front of us. Miss Green sat back down beside me, and the assistant brought over a contraption. She knelt down and placed my right foot into the machine, adjusting slides around my foot, one at the heel, one at the toes. Then she did the same with my left foot. Once finished, she stood up and walked over to Aunt Sylvia, who was browsing the racks. Aunt Sylvia pointed at a shoe, had a quick conversation with the assistant, and then returned to sit beside me. When the assistant came back, she had a shoebox and a pair of white socks in hand. She knelt down once again, expertly lifting my foot and slipping a thin pair of socks onto my feet. The socks only reached up to my ankle, their fabric light and delicate. Then she opened the shoebox and placed one of the shoes on the fitting ramp in front of me. My heart nearly stopped. The shoe was a ginger tan leather sandal, with petal shapes cut into the top and a T-bar strap across it. The square heel was about 1.5 high, which wasn't unusual for boys' shoes at the time. What was shocking, however, was how undeniably feminine the shoe was. It was a style many girls were starting to wear as the fashion shifted away from the 70s platform soles to something more traditional. Boys had shorter hair, and girls at school wore flowery dresses with T-bar sandals. I turned to Miss Green, who only smiled. Then I looked at Aunt Sylvia. Her face was filled with satisfaction, her raised eyebrow daring me to defy her. My foot hovered above the sandal, but I couldn't bring myself to step into it. Then Aunt Sylvia's hand appeared on my knee, applying just enough pressure to guide my foot downward into the shoe. I squirmed as my toes slid in, followed by my heel. I could hear the air escaping as my heel settled into place. The assistant then fastened the small silver buckle and sat back, waiting for her masterpiece to be finished. I was horrified by how slender and feminine the heel looked, especially with the flower petal design now highlighted by the whiteness of the socks. In an instant, I yanked my foot back and tried to hide it under the seat. Fitting the second sandal was just as mortifying. My face burned with humiliation as I tucked both feet beneath the seat. After Aunt Sylvia paid, I stood and took my first steps in the new, girly shoes. Though I couldn't bear to look at them, I could hear the distinct click of the slim leather soles against the linoleum floor. We paused in the shop entrance, where Aunt Sylvia combed my hair, focusing particularly on my sissy fringe. She turned the comb sideways and patted the fringe higher and straighter, just as Emma, the hairdresser, had done. She then leaned down towards me, her face close to mine. "Is my new little niece going to behave now?" she asked. I lowered my head, staring at my bare calves, the little white socks, and the girly sandals, and whispered, "Yes, Aunt." At the end of the year, Mum came back, and we moved to the seaside in southwest Dorset. I never saw Miss Green again, although Aunt Sylvia, who I had come to call Auntie after that summer, would occasionally visit us. Mum was amazed at how polite and courteous I had become. 25 years later, I sit and stare at the man in the mirror. The physical marks from that time have long since faded, except for the small dot on each earlobe.